Welcome back to Redefining AI, the tech podcast. On behalf of Squirrel, the enterprise Gen AI platform, I'm your host, Lauren Hawker Zafer. Today, we're honoured to have Dr. Serena Huang join us. Dr. Wang is a distinguished Chief Data Officer, Fortune 100 AI consultant and international keynote speaker. With over a decade of experience leading measurement and analytics strategies for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and environmental, social, and governance initiatives at iconic brands like GE, Kraft Heinz, and PayPal, she is at the forefront of integrating data and AI to revolutionize organizational culture and employee well-being. Now, in a recent book, The Inclusion Equation, Leveraging Data and AI for Organizational Diversity and Wellbeing, Dr. Wang provides a comprehensive guide to merging DEI and employee wellbeing concepts with data analytics and AI. Now, she explains how to quantify the effectiveness of new talent strategies by connecting them to a firm ROI estimate, enabling leaders to approach and win the favour of higher-ups in any organisation with the same effectiveness that marketing and financial departments do. Now, as the founder of Data with Serena, she empowers organisations worldwide to prioritise employee wellbeing and belonging alongside profits. Now, her insights have reached leaders across Asia, North America, and Europe through her sought-after keynotes and practical workshops. She also energises the next generation as a guest lecturer at top MBA programs, including Wharton, Haas, and Kellogg. I'd like to welcome you, Serena, into the conversation today. It's really wonderful to have you here on Redefining AI.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on.
We spoke just before I started the interview, and you said that you're based in Chicago. Is that correct?
Yes, the windy city, and it's getting a little bit warmer, but winter is quite cold here.
So there's one focus of today's conversation, and that's obviously data. If someone were to take an unknown data point about Chicago, what would it be?
Someone were to take an unknown data point about Chicago?
Or maybe something unexpected.
Yeah, gosh, I think it's how good the food is. I've been pleasantly surprised by just the wonderful restaurants in town. And yes, it's very global and you can get just about anything you want. So the next time you're visiting the US, don't forget to visit Chicago for food.
Do people normally forget to visit Chicago? Is it a sought-after destination?
I think so. I think, behind maybe New York, LA, San Francisco, potentially. And yeah, it's definitely, I think Chicago's known for a lot of other things like sports and maybe pizza, but there's a lot more than pizza in Chicago.
We'll have to take a trip. So today's a really fascinating topic. It's a fascinating topic that we're forefront in, and it's certainly a topic that has had maybe more sort of prominence or narrative in recent weeks, and that's certainly the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So maybe to start the conversation, I mean, there's a lot of connotation, there's a lot of association, perhaps ambiguity. Let's start with what exactly is DEI?
Yeah, gosh, it's almost become a scary word to use in certain environments. The debates have gotten really heated. But before that, I'll take us back to 2020 when the tragedies happened in the US, with the murder of George Floyd and the social unrest, right? That all woke a lot of companies up on we need to do something about this. And I think it's also probably the first time a lot of companies realize my employees are not doing okay because a lot of employees came together and said, there's someone who looks like me who was hurt, who was murdered in public. And what can we do about that? So a lot of programs started to come about around that time. And then within the US, that was also around the same time when Asian hate was happening, where because of COVID and the association with the virus being from China, whether or not you are actually from China, some people, actually myself included, got terrible comment just to my face in public. That was 2020 all the way to 2021. So definitely lots of horrible experiences that got us to start talking about this really important issue on, do we have enough diversity in our workplace? Do people feel included at work, in work environments, and decisions that impact them? And then is it equitable? Do women and men have similar opportunities? Do people of different backgrounds have similar opportunities to advance in the workplace? So I think that's kind of how it got into the news in the first place. And a lot of companies started to roll out programs to actually help people who don't look the same thrive. And fast forward, 5 years later, we're now having a very different conversation publicly around how perhaps the programs weren't as effective and we need to rethink the narrative. So this is where I bring in the data and AI to help companies think about, well, great, you have rolled out programs, let's quantify the effectiveness of them and continue to do what's working and then stop doing what's not working. But instead of just feeling good about what we rolled out, we actually know whether or not a program has impact on the intended population that we have designed the programs for.
Interesting. So what is it? I mean, there's a couple of questions that come out of that as well. The effectiveness from a data perspective, is it something that's emerged in your own efforts, in your affiliation with DEI? Maybe if we start with that question. So what's your own affiliation with DEI? Is it because you felt included in some sort of conversation narrative that was shaped that inspired you to take on what you're taking on at the moment, or
Yeah,
what's your own affiliation there?
right. Not so much. So I think I got into the space by accident because I was leading data analytics on all areas that touch talent, from hire to retire, anything in between, any sort of employee data. So sort of like the chief data officer for employee data, if you will. And one of those data points, of course, is around DEI. And so every year I would help the head of HR have conversations with the CEO on important topics like, how are we doing on hiring more, diverse talent? For example, how is our retention efforts going? How is our promotions? Are we getting more women into senior leadership teams, and what is working, what is not working? So I bring the quantitative lens to those conversations. And over time, I got involved in working on diversity and inclusion council at different companies, including GE. And I would lead the data analytics pillar in those committees. So yeah, really got the chance to move those conversations from, we threw a lot of events, a lot of people came to, career fairs and things like that, to, we know exactly which program works in promoting women. We know which program doesn't work, so we stopped doing that. And then with that, we were able to go to the CEO and CFO to ask for investments on the programs that actually made a difference.
Mhm. I mean, I think it's what's interesting there as well is an example of where it possibly has worked in a lot of larger organizations like corporations. If you were to look at, I mean, your work with the head of HR and looking at the quantifiable component of a data point and saying, do we have enough women in leadership positions? Do we have enough diversity in certain departments where more diversity should be encouraged, etc.? How do you see that transpiring then to smaller organizations that sometimes get stuck more in this sort of DEI trap of, where they might be the ones that need it more than larger organizations? Like, how does that compare? And how can smaller organizations that maybe don't have formal structures in place use data like quantifiable measurements?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And there's certainly a point where the organization is large enough where legally they're required to do this, right? But then also, we know organizations, regardless of size, need things like innovation. And innovation is one of those things that we know from research and from, I'm sure, your personal experience as well, is strongly tied to whether or not you have diversity in the group that is creating some sort of innovation, right? The best way to get new ideas is to have people who don't come from the same backgrounds. Otherwise, you have exactly the same thoughts. And so I think I would encourage small organizations to think about how are you doing on innovation? Are you able to innovate in the way that you need? Are you able to reach the customers that you need? Because on the other end of that is, do you have employees that actually share the same customer experience, if you will, can relate to your customers that you want to get to? And if you don't, right, if you're trying to reach Gen Z, for example, and all your employees are Gen X, maybe they are going to struggle to create a marketing message that connects with them. For instance, if you're expanding to new markets that's global, do you have people with global mindsets, global experiences that can speak to a different culture, not just about the language, but actually understand how other cultures work? So I use those as examples of really ask yourself, are you innovating in a way that works for you? And are you able to reach the new customers and new market segments that you can? And if not, maybe take a look at your employee makeup and see where you can find those different type of experiences to help you with the innovation and improving market share.
And you also mentioned as well that it's an important component of retention. Where does DEI and the impact of a less diverse environment come into play around the whole retention conversation in organizations?
Yeah, some of that is a little bit harder to measure and quantify, of course. But I ask people to think about a time when you felt excluded at work. Maybe it was a meeting that you feel like you should have been invited to. Maybe it's even a dinner that you feel like you should have been invited to, or a decision that was made for you that impacted you. You probably didn't feel very good. And over time, that type of exclusion feeling make you wonder, do I belong here? Do I have a place here? Do I have a community? Or should I go somewhere else? So I really encourage companies to think about not just the diversity makeup, but also, do people feel a sense of inclusion and that they belong? And that we have seen strongly connected to retention. So if you look at a simple survey where you ask a team, individuals on the team, do you feel included in important decisions that impact your work, for instance? And then you also ask them, do you see yourself working here 2 years from now? 6 months from now. And so that's a way we measure intent to stay, right? Again, of course, it's everything could change tomorrow. I don't know. But oftentimes we see strong correlations between a sense of inclusion and belonging and their intent to stay. And even more so when we follow up with conversations, because some of these are harder to get just on a purely using numbers and surveys. So we were asked in like follow-up focus groups. And we will hear from individuals from different backgrounds saying, when I don't see anyone like me in leadership positions, I don't think I can advance and I can get promoted. Right. It's not everyone, but some people, don't care. And but others feel like, hey, if I don't see a woman, for example, in tech and engineering, where it's largely male, if they don't see anyone in the C-suite and VP plus positions, they're thinking it's going to be really hard for me to make it there. Maybe I should go somewhere else. And then also think about the competition, right, between companies. If they were to look up the leadership team at your competitor, does it resemble a leadership team that maybe they would want to go? And therefore, you could be losing talent to your competitors because of the makeup of your leadership team. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly resonates what you're saying. Have you ever, and I don't know if this is within your remit as well, but surely there's a conversation that can be had with certain types of organization that might fulfill this stereotype of an opportunity for diversification. Have you ever been in a situation where you've had to consult or approach an organization and there's been a lot of resistance to a more diverse organization? And have you had the opportunity to show them the impact of keeping it very homogenous?
Yes, absolutely. I think anything that is worth doing, you're probably going to run into resistors. So over time, I've come across leaders who may not be a strong believer. And they may say things like, well, we're going to hire and promote based on merit, right? Based on who is the most qualified, and I don't care what they look like. That's your typical argument against DEI, right? And again, I think I bring back the things like, well, you say you're having a hard time reaching, I'll give an example in financial services within the US. You say you're having a hard time reaching the Hispanic demographic, right? You're having a hard time getting into different communities that might be of lower income. Maybe they don't have a college degree, right? Whatever the situation is. And, why do you think that is? Sometimes I ask them simple questions just so that they are pondering. And they could say, well, our sales team just isn't as effective. Our marketing efforts are not working there. Well, why is your marketing efforts not working? Are they not clicking on your ads? So, and then we eventually get to the tough conversation around, you know what? No one on my team can speak in a way that resonates with the target market that I want to reach. And it really is the bottom line that is impacted by the lack of diversity. So, and of course, I think for any leader, if everything is glowing, all your metrics are, in the green, above 100% of your target, then nothing is wrong. And then you don't need to fix anything. They probably are not open to ideas. But most people, when they start to think about what are the areas where I want my business to grow, that's where opportunities for DEI really comes in. And sometimes they just haven't seen the benefits. And so I sort of nudge people to sometimes even say, hey, it's going well, but what if it can be better? What if it can be even better, and give it a try?
Sure, it's always a good argument. And we've had a lot of people highlighting that it can be better with AI, which brings another dynamic into the conversation. There's the sort of two edge or sort of two sides of the fence where some people believe that AI's role in DEI is positive. And then there's others that have the skepticism of, well, there's a lot of criticism about the individual components of AI systems, which did exist before generative AI, but now there's a certain enhancement of fears that may sort of outline or point to that it is a threat, that AI is a threat to the advancement of DEI. Which side, or are you not on any side, or how do you feel about the introduction? Because you've mentioned that your book, I believe, Inclusion Equation, emphasizes merging DEI and employee well-being with data analytics and AI, correct?
Yes, I am a firm believer that AI is a net positive in both DEI and well-being for employees. I, of course, must mention that the AI can be biased and, all of that. But on the other hand, you can also use AI to detect bias, to detect things that are not inclusive in the workplace. So you can use AI to analyze whether or not your language is inclusive and give you recommendations to write it in a way that is better. So there are lots of opportunities for that. So, traditionally, you may not have a good sense of how in a large organization how employees are really doing. And we've seen a lot of headlines around burnout recently. Well, how do you know if someone is burned out? Do you wait until they say, hey, I'm out of here? Or I need to take a leave and I need to be in the hospital. That's too late. AI can actually help you proactively identify burnout signals from conversations. Let's say it's conversations in Slack, conversations on emails, and in publicly available forums where people are mentioning they need more help, they feel overwhelmed, and you can pick up words using AI that can tell you which team is needing help. Plus, you also have access to things like meeting times. Are people meeting outside of regular normal hours, right? Is there a lot of things happening on their calendar on Sundays, which I know in certain European countries is actually not legal. But within the US, again, if you can get the privacy regulations compliance with that, you can actually start to see which organizations, which particular managers are leading teams that are on the verge of burnout. I've seen data like people are on Zoom call 16 hours a day. I don't need to be a PhD to tell you that it's not sustainable. Right? And so where do you see that happening and get to understand why that is? Maybe they need additional resources. Maybe their project deadline is just too tight. And those can be really helpful. And we don't have to have a lot of human mining this data and doing the analysis manually anymore because of AI. So I'm very hopeful that it can definitely help longer term.
No, it's fascinating. I mean, obviously, you can see the sort of traces of how, as you've mentioned, you could possibly do like a corpus analysis of like a discourse analysis of language indication, of people that have indicated, be it through idiomatic expressions or whatever they're using. Also, like Zoom meetings that are an indication of overstretched behavior. It's also really fascinating if you were to give advice to anyone that's listening that's looking for that sort of first practical step, because I think again, and I don't know, maybe it's not, I think there's a difference in being able to analyze it in smaller organizations than larger organizations. And how does culture fit into that as well? Like if you're working in a culture where there's an expectation, like where does someone start? There's so many questions there.
Yes. Yes, I think definitely for larger organizations, you can go the quantitative route, right? With surveys actively asking employees how they're doing, how they're feeling, along with the passive data and like kind of meeting and chat data that I mentioned. But for small organizations, like when I run a team of 20 to 30 people, I just ask them. I think it has to come from a place where the leader actually genuinely cares about the well-being of their employees. And here's the thing, if you are sick, you can't perform 100%. That's it at the end of the day. And when I say sick, we think about things that are visible, right? But we don't think as much about invisible illness, like whether it's mental health related or something else. Or even on Zoom, you can't see what's happening with my legs, right? If I broke my ankle, you wouldn't know right now. But really be curious and ask your employees how they're doing. A simple thing that I did was on Monday during a staff meeting, I would ask everyone on a scale 1 to 10, how are you doing right now? Just right now, give me a number. And to avoid echo chambers happening, we have to share that number at the same time. So what happens, and I share my number later, right? Because otherwise my number will influence theirs, right? Again, very, very simple practice. And over time, I was able to see, hey, Lauren is usually a 7, and today she's a 3. Something is wrong. Let me check in with Lauren, for instance. Or, David is usually a 9, and today David is only an 8. Something is going on because everyone has a different baseline. And that's what kind of the power of curiosity can do. You don't have to use it, but I'm sharing as an example of now every week, I sort of know how everyone's doing. And it opens up conversations around, it's not to say, hey, why, Lauren, are you a 5 or 3 today? But it provides a natural way for someone to ask for help. And they could say, hey, I'm having, daycare issues at home. I just need a little bit more coverage in the morning. Can I get out of morning meetings this week, please? So that lets me know how I can support them as a leader. And I don't have to run huge surveys, right? It's a simple chat on the Zoom call. And I think having that curiosity and genuine care is where I would recommend leaders to start.
Yeah, the human touch. So just before we end the conversation, the inclusion equation, why did you write it? What do you want people to take from it?
Oh, So many reasons. I think I, for a long time, sat at the intersection of the technical data science and the human side in the business. And I really want to bridge the gap where I want to show people who are more quantitative and loves data analytics and AI to see there is application in the human space, like inclusion and well-being, where you can use data and AI. And then also for practitioners in the well-being and inclusion space who may not be in love with numbers, and that's not why most people get into, those domains, but to see how easy it is. Now with AI's help, you can actually become an expert in analyzing this type of data because you have a partner called AI today. So that's what I hope to that people will take away. Either side of the spectrum, you can give it a try.
Wonderful. Well, I hope they do, and we'll certainly encourage your listeners as well to have a read of your book. It's been wonderful talking with you today, and I hope that everyone else who's joined us on this conversation has enjoyed it as much as I have. And I'd like to thank you, Serena. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if you want to find me on LinkedIn, I would love to continue the conversation.
Thank you.